Food insecurity in urban areas, how 3 cities locally and globally are facing food insecurity. The urban population in 2014 accounted for 54% of the total global population. Growth in these areas has seen such an exponential growth over the past 50-some years due to industrial and technological growth, but cities are starting to reach a maximum capacity, and we have seen a slow decrease in growth due to a shortage in space, resources, and most importantly, food. A food desert is an area in an urban city where there is no grocery store, market, or any other way of receiving fresh food for an affordable price. In rural areas, a fresh food vendor must be within 10 miles to be considered a food desert. Food deserts are all across the world and have many impacts on the population, from malnutrition to stunting. In cities, people mostly buy food rather than growing it themselves. Large food miles, moving food from rural areas into cities, contribute to food insecurity problems because transportation costs make food more expensive and therefore harder to access. To reduce food miles, many cities are trying to bring agriculture into urban areas to have a more accessible food source for the growing population in the city.
Tanzania is one country where urban growth is evident. While the population is increasing significantly in all of Tanzania, the total population is expected to see a 63% increase by 2030. The urban population is expected to grow much faster than the rural population, over 3 times as quick. In Dar es Salaam, the largest city in Tanzania and fastest growing city in sub-Saharan Africa, 32% of children under the age of 5 are stunted in growth due to lack of food, and 34% of urban households do not have an adequate food supply due to high costs. Stefan Schmidt is a professor of city and regional planning at Cornell University who has studied urban agriculture in Tanzania. According to Schmidt, the Tanzanian government has asserted that urban agriculture is necessary for feeding their population and has devoted zones to agriculture and has an inventory of vacant space in the city to grow food, and they're incorporating community gardens into new housing plans. But it has had trouble developing due to a lack of awareness of its role in feeding the population, a competition for space due to urbanization, and the fact that legal issues having to do with urban farming are ambiguous and poorly enforced.
Because of its location, nestled in the Ganges Delta, Bangladesh has semi-frequent flooding which devastates the country time and time again. Because the food staple of Bangladesh is rice, floods ravage the crops planted and sends the country into turmoil. The flooding will not only necessitate large amounts of aid to rural areas, it cuts off food from the urban cities as well. On top of frequent shortages of food coming into the city, the rapid rate of growth in urban centers in Bangladesh, especially Dhaka, have caused land that was once used for agriculture to give way to housing and other urban elements. Combining the lack of availability of food with the fact that 86% of the urban population of Bangladesh lives below the absolute poverty line, Bangladesh is looking for solutions. The answer for right now? Rooftop gardening. Many Bangladeshi officials have turned to this as a way to lessen the blow of crippling undernutrition in urban centers and to decrease the reliance on flood-prone rural areas. Currently, however, Bangladesh has absolutely staggering malnourishment rates, with 1/3 of the country regularly not getting the nutrients they require, and malnutrition levels frequently reaching 50% and higher during times of flooding. The United Nations World Food Program has made Bangladesh one of its highest priorities. Their research has produced frightening statistics such as undernutrition costs more than $1 billion in lost productivity every year, and even the wealthiest households, 26% of the children under the age of 5 are stunted, and 12% are wasted. So, Professor Radcliffe, what are some examples of food insecurity in Columbus?
So I think the main thing when people think about food insecurity, or one of the most surprising things to find out, is that in Ohio, about 1 in 6 families face food insecurity in a given year, which is really high considering that Ohio is such an agriculturally productive state, and the United States is such a wealthy nation. To find that kind of level of lack of food access is really, really amazing. In Columbus itself, there are quite a few neighborhoods that deal with food access issues, like Franklinton, King Lincoln District, North Linden, a lot of places where people have to go a long way to get fresh food.
Okay, great. And how are we trying to combat food insecurity?
So there's a lot of organizations and groups from a lot of different kind of angles approaching it. There's community gardens, community farms that try to bring fresh food directly in by growing it there within those communities themselves, and bring like education and knowledge on how to grow food. There are policies coming from local government, like the local food action plan that's trying to address food access. And there are also groups like from the university trying to work with community service and things like that. As a member of the university, it's really interesting to me to try to find out how those groups are functioning, which are examples that are really working well, and how they fit together, and how as a member of the university I could help to engage with that process and make a difference.
Okay, great. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
People are working on ways to make growing food more efficient and more accessible for people in cities. Since the distance between where the food is produced and consumed in cities is so great, in food deserts, some sustainable and alternative forms of growing fresh food have been developed. For example, aquaponics, which is growing plants while also growing fish to create an efficient cycle, allows both the plants and fish to receive nutrients from one another. And the vertical growing systems are being used to conserve surface area on the ground by growing plants in vertical containers that do not require soil to grow. These are 2 newer solutions to combat food deserts. Population growth is becoming a major concern around the world for people's safety and well-being. Food deserts around the globe are causing malnutrition, stunting, and even death. Tanzania, Bangladesh, and Columbus all offer their own particular issues with food deserts. These cities are combating food deserts by converting empty plots of land into community and rooftop gardens to grow food within urban areas. Moreover, new technologies such as aquaponics and vertical growing are being used in areas with food deserts to provide fresh food and fish to populations impacted by these food deserts. These, among others, are some ways food deserts are being combated.